I just took a quick look at the television monitor. Fox News says they've already had comments coming in from all over the country about tonight's Republican debate, which is on the Fox News and Business channel. That's it, which is a pretty good channel itself. I used to have it on DirecTV and used to be able to catch lots of good shows there. It's where you'd see a lot of Judge Napolitano, and I think that network is run by Neil Cavuto, who actually went to college with my sister in the ancient days. He doesn't look that old, but I'll tell you what, he's not a young guy. Steve Millington is in the studio with us. He's the chairman of the Twin Falls County Republican Party. Bill Colley with you as well on Top Story on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. First of all, welcome back.
Hey, thank you. It's good to be here.
Tonight's debate. Now, after the last debacle.
Yeah, that's a debacle, not a debate. That was a debacle.
We have been getting a real run. I think the evidence of media bias has been piling up, and especially after last Friday with Ben Carson. Can Republicans ever get a fair shake?
Never. And there, for several reasons. Number one, it's interesting that if you poll all of these prominent media people, less than 10% of them will identify as either Republican or conservative. And so the odds are against us, 9-1 against us, under the best of circumstances. And many of these people have spent their life in, they went to big elitist universities, and so they have a tendency to be a little to the left side of the road anyway. And then they go to work for the Democratic Party or a Democratic candidate and liberal type organizations before they complete their migration into the mainline media. So their background and their work choices lead them to be more liberal in their opinions and in their writings. And so we find that so many of these people don't really care about facts. And an interesting aside, why should I even care about the facts? In today's instant news world, I want to be the first one out with the story. Even if it's wrong and I have to correct it later, I want to be the first one out. And part of this is the advent of electronic news media. So if I post a story and it hits the electronic airspace, it isn't airspace, it's electronic space, then I get some credits because my story was the first one out there. And to a certain extent, the media ownership look for hits on their internet space. Even if I have to correct the story later, that's going to generate additional hits for their media space. And so the correctness, the authenticity of the story is not nearly as critical now as it was 15, 20 years ago, perhaps, because even if it's wrong, I can go back and correct it. And what we're looking for is how many hits do I have on my webpage?
Because that way you can sell higher rates for advertising.
That's exactly what it is. We're selling advertising rates, and I don't know about all of you out there listening, but when I go onto those spaces and I want to read the story, it takes me 5 minutes to get past all of the advertising blogs before I can get back and read the story. Or halfway through the story, something pops up, and I say to myself, okay, I'm looking for one of these pop-up blockers so that I can block these things, and I haven't found one yet. I think what it is I'm too cheap to go out and buy one. But anyway, that's what they're looking for, is how many hits do I get on my webpage? And so the absolute correctness is not the critical issue. And even if we paint everybody with an ugly brush, who cares? We'll change it tomorrow. And
I read where Carson may have the highest rating in the history of polling for honesty as a candidate. And this was the reason they wanted to plant a seed he was dishonest.
They want to destroy him, and that's one of that's his Achilles heel, maybe, huh? So that they can hit him there and take him out. Because if they've got to find some place, some ammunition that will take him out. And so they go back searching for all of these worthless things that they can't substantiate and can't prove. And the thing that's interesting, it's just like I saw just a brief television clip where they were a couple of news people were challenging and hitting him and hitting him and hitting him, and he said, "Where were you and all of your uh, efforts when Barack Obama was running? How come you didn't challenge his sealed collegiate records? Every one of his collegiate records are sealed. We can't get at him. We can't look at him. We can't find out what he did. Nobody else gets that privilege. Well, what? That's fairness in the news? Well, it
90,
looks
nine-
like to me that that's a little bit of bias.
93%, there was a survey done, I saw it yesterday, 93% of reporters in this country are Democrats.
Wow.
And many of them they contribute as well. Now, when I was actually reporting, I was not allowed to do that. Well, I was told it was unethical. So until I became a talk show host where I actually was just giving opinions and I left the journalist part of it behind, then I started writing checks, campaign contributions to candidates. But prior to that, that was considered a no-no. And some people in the past used to get fired for this sort of thing. Doesn't happen anymore.
No, it doesn't.
We need to take a quick break.
Okay.
And then we're going to have some telephone callers, too, as well. Whenever Steve Millington is here, the phones start ringing. Doesn't matter what he says, and sometimes what he says is a little bit edgy. That might be what it's all about. More coming up with the chairman of the Twin Falls County Republican Party. It's 20 minutes away from 9 o'clock. Bill Colley with you as well on News Radio 1310, KLIX, and newsradio1310.com. Our guest in the studio, Steve Millington. He's the chairman of the Twin Falls County Republican Party. He joins us Tuesday mornings between 8:30 and 9 o'clock. It's coming up on 8:43, 35. Bill Colley with you as well on News Radio 1310, KLIX, and newsradio1310.com. Telephone number if you'd like to reach the show, 736-0300. That's 736-0300. Also, my email address, bill.colley@townsquaremedia.com. That's bill.colley@townsquaremedia.com. We were just mentioning before the break, 93% of journalists, survey says, are Democrats. That would mean 7% are either independents or Republicans. So that number could be 4% Republican, 3% independent. It's tiny.
We don't have much of an opportunity to be seen as fair or equal. That the media is going to slam us up one side and down the other.
Even on the local level, I think this happens.
I don't think that it's necessarily a nationwide thing. I think it spills over. Where do the nationwide people come from?
Right.
They come from the local communities and work their way up.
It does seem,
upstream.
though, that it's harsher at the national level than it is locally.
I think it is. Maybe we're a little bit more generous at the local level, and we're a little more forgiving, and they're just working there. But when we get to the national level, and those we see a lot more of their stuff. They get opinions printed. We may see an opinion in our local paper, but we always have bylines from Associated Press or UP or wherever. And that's the national stuff.
Column from Dr. Krauthammer, but that's a syndicated column.
Yeah.
There really aren't many what you'd call right-of-center voices that we see.
Not too many anymore, I'll tell you what.
We've got a couple of callers with us.
Okay, let's go.
Steve Millington on the air with us this morning, and our caller joins us on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. And what's your question or comment?
Hey, Steve. Good morning, Steve. Listen, I respect you a lot, but I'm willing to donate $10,000 to the Republican Party. If you can show me on the Constitution where does it say the freedom of the press has got to be one or the other? Isn't freedom of the press supposed to keep our government from keep it honest? Am I right or am I wrong? If I'm wrong, I'm willing to donate $10,000.
That'd be nice.
Give me just a few minutes to get that research, man. That kind of money just gets me real excited.
So I guess that means the Constitution says we're supposed to have a biased media.
No, the Constitution, the objective with the First Amendment, I think that's where the freedom of the press is related. In the pre-constitutional era, when we were subject to the King of England, there was no such thing as a non-biased publication.
And you could get jailed for something.
Absolutely. There was only one newspaper, and that was the state newspaper. We see that a lot today, even in Russia. The Communist Party is gone, but they're a lot of holdovers. The prominent publication is Pravda, I think, and it's basically state run and state controlled. So freedom of the press relates to the comment that the government will not be the only instrument by which news is broadcast. We can have many other non-governmental sources for all of our news information. Now, that has worked very well until the last 10, 15 years.
You know, I think about that, and when we say, well, we'll sit there to hold the government accountable, but my view of holding the government accountable isn't necessarily the view of my neighbors. And there was a guy, a little history, named John Peter Zenger. If you were to Google that name or use some other search engine, this was a guy who the Crown tried to put into jail in the colonial days.
Right.
And the court actually ruled in his favor, and that helped set up this notion
of freedom of the press.
Right. In other words, let someone say what they want. We're not going to jail them for it.
And that's we see that even today. However, we have taken a different turn on that under this freedom of the press thing, and we say to ourselves, I should be allowed or free from any external interference to publish my thoughts and beliefs any way I want. Unfortunately, that's the only one. We have gone from driving down both sides of the road or in the middle of the road to driving only on one far side of the road. We don't have any other options. Now, freedom of the press, the Constitution does say you can do whatever you want. If you don't like that, don't subscribe to their publication. Cancel your subscription. Go somewhere else. In fact, as I was looking at this question,
cut off those web hits that they use for advertising.
Well, and one of the things that we see so much anymore is that the great increase in internet website searches for news has caused the subscription percentages for newspapers mostly to decline greatly in the last 10 years. So it's important for the news media to dig their heels in and get tough and ugly with their position, because the internet sources of news is overrunning them. And so what they're having to do is become much more
sensational.
That's the word. Yeah, let's get more sensational, because the internet is taking all of our, quote, market, unquote.
We got a caller with us.
Okay, we'll take another one.
And I hope the caller's still with us. It's 8:48. Excuse me. You're up next with Steve Millington.
Yeah. Good morning. Freedom of the press belongs to those who own one. Really should be an amendment to the First Amendment, because if you look at the situation, over 100 years ago, the socialists that decided they wanted to take over this country and make us a socialist utopia decided to take over the editorial boards of the 25 largest newspapers. There was no radio, no TV, obviously, or very little radio. And so they took over the editorial boards, and you see those same papers today. You can name them, almost all of them are still in that regard. But as far as conservative on campus, these colleges for years, for decades now, are just totally socialist indoctrination propaganda centers. And that's why we have 93+% of our journalists. They're a product of their environment. We saw that locally with one of the editors that I think actually ran out of town because he was so liberal. So anyway, we have to realize that the colleges are training socialists to be the media people, and freedom of the press really doesn't hardly exist anymore.
That's an interesting point. A personal comment on that one. A couple of years ago when I was running for political office, I was real disgusted with some of the newspapers, and one guy grabbed me by the collar and said, "Let me just make this one statement to you. You can never fight the printed media. And the reason why is they buy the paper by the rolls, and they buy the ink by the barrels, and you can't compete with them." And I thought quietly about that, and I thought, you're right. There's not anything that I can do or say that's going to be able to counteract the power of the media. If you get a chance, go over to the where they print the newspaper. You'll see semi trucks lined up in there, not lined up. When they deliver the newsprint, it comes in semi trucks, and there's many multiple rolls of newsprint delivered at the same time, and they're big. They're got to be 5 or 6 feet in diameter, and they just stack them up there, and they turn the press on, and the ink comes in 55-gallon drums, and they just stack them up and start pouring the ink on the paper. You can't win.
We used to actually go over to the Dover Post in Delaware, and we'd get a roll. They'd sometimes spare a roll. You could get that. Then you could take it home and put it down for the dog. So if the dog had to do his business indoors. And I always thought that was a great use for newspapering.
Oh, okay. Well, and you know, the idea, and I, to some extent, I blame the media for this. Freedom of the press gives them all kinds of special privileges, and to a certain extent, we see now the abuses that come to those special privileges. Anytime you get somebody who thinks they have all of these granted privileges, they begin to abuse them.
Well, there is they despise, for instance, talk radio, which is mainly conservative.
Right.
And they despise a lot of what's on the internet. But the fact of the matter is, I've got a piece here from the Daily Signal today. That comes out of the Heritage Foundation. Rob Bluey, the editor, I know him. He did an interview with me back in 2008. I've got the Daily Caller here. That's Tucker Carlson.
Right.
And I've got a number of these various publications. I've got Weekly Standard. They don't like the fact that people can go look at these alternatives.
That's one of the reasons why we see so much pressure from government to limit or contain the internet news media, because most of it is, in fact, conservative in nature. And if we could somehow kill all that off, then the only news media people would have access to would be the liberal side of the page, not the conservative side of the page. So it presents an interesting, and I ask myself a question once in a while when I get disgusted with the mainline, the drive-by media. I think there's a very famous radio personality who uses that term a lot, the drive-by media. At what point will the drive-by media, at what point will they have so disenfranchised or disgusted all of the viewers and readers that we no longer pay attention to them at all? And then it doesn't make any difference about freedom of the press. Freedom of press becomes immaterial because it doesn't mean anything to us. And the greatest threat to that is suddenly we become completely uninformed people. And I don't care whether we're uninformed on the liberal side of the page or uninformed on the conservative side of the page. Either one of them is not healthy.
It's 8:54. Steve Millington is our guest on Top Story on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. Bill Colley with you as well. 35, looking to warm up today at least into the 40s and into the 50s, mid-50s by this weekend. I used to work for David Schumacher, who people might remember from CBS and ABC News way back. He was, one of the guys covering the space program and the like. David got out of, he was flying with, what do you call it? Strategic Air Command, and so he was a very conservative guy, military guy. When he left the Air Force after 6 years, took a job at a newspaper in Omaha, Nebraska. Quickly moved over to their radio station and then their TV station, and while still relatively young, got called to CBS News, where he worked with that great crew they had in the 60s. David told me one time, we were at lunch a few years ago, and he said, the problem with mainstream media today is they are so dang liberal. It's not the internet and cable and talk radio that are killing them. It's the fact that a lot of people are turned off by just how far left they are. And I thought he would know. He was there in all three different radio, TV, and newspapers.
And that's one of the things that bothers me is, will they become so, will the public become so disenfranchised with them, disgusted with the way they do things, that any and all media is immaterial to us?
Well, people
that's a
lose
bad
faith
thing
in the institution. All of a sudden, when they have no more faith in it, that's a very serious problem.
That is. Yeah, we're getting down close to the end, right?
Right.
Okay, one thing. Every month, the Republicans have what we call our monthly meeting. That will be tomorrow night, Wednesday night. We meet at the Twin Falls County and Zoning Conference Room in the County West Complex. Starts at 7 o'clock.
That's the old hospital.
That's the old hospital building right down on Addison. And the P&Z conference room is on the southeast corner of the building, directly across the street from the Oasis Stop and Go service station on that interchange. Um, Ken Edmonds, the director of the State Department of Labor, will be our speaker tonight, and he's going to talk to us about what does the Department of Labor do generally, and how can it be helpful and useful to Twin Falls County and the Magic Valley. He'll be there for a good session, and we encourage questions and comments. So tomorrow night, 7 o'clock at the P&Z conference room in the County West Complex.
And just to let people know, of course, we'll see you again next week.
Sure will.
And we don't know for sure yet, but in a few weeks we may see you a lot.
Yes,
because I may be we're not going to surprise anybody, but if I'm going to take some time off, Steve Millington is going to take over the main microphone here.
That could be real scary, ladies and gentlemen. if Steve has the microphone for 2 hours every day, wow, things could really go south.
I don't think you are ever going to run out of things to talk about.
Well, it's fun to come in and just kick these things around and see where we're going and talk about the things.
You know, I was telling you, he's a competitor, but he's my friend. My friend Zeb Bell. He actually does his show from home.
Oh, okay.
And I could see you someday setting yourself up like that. Just put the microphone in the den. And
I still like to get out and drive up and down the road and see what's going on. And so that would be a real long shot, but that's an interesting. We have done that actually a time or two when I have been on the road.
Right.
Well, I just take my phone with me and I set up my computer and I watch on live online with the sound off, and you and I just have our conversation. So the marvels of communication today are they're delightful.
Well, it works out for him because that way he can keep an eye on his cattle, which is all of his big investments while he's actually on the air. I don't have any of those yet. We have 9 o'clock news on the way. We want to thank Steve Millington for dropping in, chairman of the Twin Falls County Republican Party. And Bill Colley with you as well on Top Story. One more hour of the program is still coming up. There's some more news today on the energy front, energy and environmental front, why it is the globalists don't want you eating bacon any longer. Details on that ahead.